So, hi and welcome to yet another session. I know it has been quite some time, but I'm back. So, on today's video, we'll actually be creating our calculator app, but now using Dart and Flutter. So, what's the difference? When you create your calculator or any app using Dart and Flutter, you can actually run your app on your mobile phone, meaning that we'll be developing a mobile app on today's session. Something you need to note before you start, you actually need prior experience in Dart and Flutter, since I won't be covering the basics. Okay, so let's dive in. Go ahead and open Android Studio and create a new project. Let me do so on mine. Next, I'll call it calculator. Create. So as it is creating, you'll actually need to go through our designs. Remember, on the first ever video, we started by doing some designs for the calculator app. So we'll be using that as our template. Let me open the designs. Here it is. Okay. So we'll be using these designs to actually create an app that is similar to what we designed. So designing your app helps you save a lot of time in terms of making changes. Yes. It's something you'll understand as we continue. Okay. So once you create your project, you'll actually notice that Flutter adds some code, but we won't be using that. We'll be scrapping everything. But before I do that, let me start my emulator. I hope we'll be able to run this. So as it continues, I'll erase all the code from here. And also this. And I'll create another file and call it calculator. Dot. So our emulator started. Let me make a few changes. Okay. I'll start by creating a class calculator. extends. So this will be a stateful widget. So let's write our constructor. Then override. So we'll create the states. It will be the state of our current class, which is calculator. It creates a state, create state. And for the create states, it will be calculator state. So if you're new to Dart and Flutter, you might actually wonder why we are using the, I don't know the English term for this, hyphen or something of the sort, but it is used to indicate a private member or variable, meaning that it can only be accessed by functions of the same class. Hence, it is not directly visible to the outside classes. Let me first close this. Then the code for our app will be inside our calculator state. So it's what I'm writing right now. Calculator state extends our state calculator and to complete this we need a widget builder. It provides a context and it should return a widget. And so one of the best practices is that you need to use a scaffold for every page. So a scaffold provides the space for your body, for your app bar, and your drawer. Drawer is the menu that slides from the side. App bar is the top part that is usually a bit different from the body. We learn more as we continue. So we'll return a scaffold. So before we continue here, let's go back to our main file. And so for our main file, we'll run the calculator class. And you can see once you click it, automatically imports it. So let's go back. So I'll create a variable final, I'll call it window. So this will place everything, all the widgets. And inside the scaffold, you'll add the body, which will be a container, and give it a padding of 0, edge insets dot 0. Then the child will be our window. Okay, so a column allows multiple children and it arranges them downwards, meaning vertically, whereas a row, it still allows multiple children, but the difference is that it arranges them horizontally, meaning side by side. So let's add the children. Let's go back to our design. Based on what we designed, there are multiple widgets. One of the widgets is our input, which is where we'll key in our data, which is this part. Then the rest are the buttons, which when clicked need to provide an input. So let's go back to our code. Okay, let me first check the color, and you can see the color is provided here. So this will be the color of our whole app. We'll assign it to our scaffold. So at the scaffold, background color. So since that's a hex color code, need the color constructor. Then add this before the hex color code, then paste the rest. And it's a constant. Let's try and run this. So I'd already set up my emulator, and it is what is displayed here on the right. It will actually take some time. So as it runs, you could maybe do something. Okay. So one of the most common concepts or widgets are the expanded widgets, which you're going to use, but let me give a brief explanation. So for the expanded widgets, these are widgets that automatically resize themselves according to the available space. Meaning that regardless of the available space, maybe depending on the phone you're running it on, our app automatically resizes itself to fit the available space without the developer having to manually adjust. Yes, so let me check out the error. So looks like I forgot to add the material app. So let's do that. So the material app allows you to automatically use the widgets belonging to the material app. Then this is where our calculator comes in. Let's run this again. And there it is. So it provides a blank screen, but you can actually see that the color is what we specified. So next, we'll add our input. But before we do that, we'll have to divide the space into 2 using our expanded widget. So let me come here. So inside our children, we can add as many widgets as we want. Let's provide a flex of 1. But after each widget, you need to add your comma. Let's add our second widget. So we're mainly dividing this into 2 parts. And by flex, we determine the amount of space it takes from the available space, how the space is divided. So we can see for our first widget, it takes 1 out of the whole, and for second widget, it takes 2 out of the whole. So let's go ahead and add a child. So for our first child, it will be a text field. So for our text, we don't need a keyboard, so we'll have to specify that. Okay, before we add our text, I think we need to add a container first. Maybe for the padding, you could give it a padding of 2 dot all 2. Then let's add our text field. So number 1, we'll make it read-only. By read-only, it means you can't edit it using the keyboard provided by the phone. Meaning, to explain this in simpler terms, it's that whenever we click on our input, the keyboard won't appear, meaning that the user will be restricted to using the buttons that were already displayed. So for the read-only, we'll make sure it's true. And let me count How many rows do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have 5 rows. So for this, you'll have a column inside which will house the various rows. Let me refresh. You can actually see it appears. Let me first change the background color to make it a bit more visible. So we'll first of all specify decoration, which determines the appearance of our text field. So for the focused border, we want it to be none. So it will be input border dot none, meaning that no border should be displayed. What other borders do you need to specify? Also for the enabled border, input border dot none. So next, the fill color. Let me put colors dot white. So colors is a class for specifying the colors. When you want to give colors that are named, from what we've done previously, you'll actually notice that we gave a color based on the hex color code. But this time it's different. We're providing a named color. So the main reason why we're setting it white is that we can actually determine its size. So let me refresh. Let me change something. Field true. Yes, and you can actually see it actually appears. One thing you'll notice is that our white color actually it touches this top part, which it shouldn't. And to sort that, we need to add a safe area. So a safe area provides a padding on the top allowing this data to be displayed without interrupting with the app's view. So let me add a safe area. So I'll just paste whatever I'd put before. And if I refresh, yes, you can actually see the difference. So for input, you'll also need to ensure that it is multi-line. Wait, we need to provide a styling for our text. So for our text, we need something big. So text style. Font size, maybe 30. Color white. We'll actually test for the size a bit later. And weight bold. So you'll actually notice this actually changes the height, the line height, because of the font. But what we'll do, we'll actually ensure that our text field is multi-lined. Multi-lined meaning it can accept more than one line. By default, whenever you're specifying your text field, all the text appears on one line. But in our case, we want like maybe 2 to 3 lines. So you have to change. So I'll specify the minimum lines and the maximum line. So minimum lines will be 3 and the maximum lines will still be 3. So let me refresh. That's a bit better. So next, okay, let me change something. I first want to test how big the text is. So let me also change the color for this. This is too small. Yeah, this is actually too small. Maybe let's try 150. 120. a bit better. You could also change the font family. So we'll set it to times, which is Times New Roman. As you can actually see, it's different. So let me check where our text build spans. You can see it actually covers some good parts. If this is the first line, and it needs to have like a minimum of 3 lines. What happens? Let me test. I don't want to change the size, so could change the flex. What if we give these two the same size? But that looks like it's too big. Please set this to 3, this to 2. But maybe I could also change this to 100 and disable the color. Let me also specify the cursor color to white. I think that's a bit better. I don't know why it's exceeding the 3 lines. Okay. Let me delete this. Whatever is on our emulator. And now, so let's work on our buttons. I'll make this a constant. So for buttons, I want us to create a reusable class, meaning that we won't be able to manually create a class for each button. We'll understand it when we actually do it. So let's go ahead, create a new file. I'll call it component. Components.dart, and create the class button. It shouldn't hold the state, meaning we'll extend a stateless widget. Let's add our constructor button. So since we want this to be reusable, the user needs to specify certain values, and the values will be specified at our constructor. So how do we do this? So our first value will be the digit displayed. So let's go ahead, final the data type, then value. So this dot value. Edits, and it's required. So let's create our button. Build provides a build context. And it returns a container where we'll place our button. So we'll give it a padding, edge insets dot all three, then our button. Give it an elevated button. So for our button, we need to provide the function or what should take place once it's clicked and what should be displayed inside our button. So inside our child, we provide a text, and for the text, the mandatory data is the value that should be displayed. In our case, it will be this value that we passed. We can also style the values to be displayed. Font size, let me give it maybe 20. color white. What else? Maybe font weight. This will be a constant since no value changes. So on pressed. Let's first not do anything with that. What else? Let's style our button. Elevated button dot style from. So the difference is that in this case we're styling our elevated button, whereas inside here we were styling our text that will be displayed inside the button. So for a button, we'll give it maybe a border radius, the background color. For the background color, we'll choose this. If you weren't here in the first video and you're interested in knowing how we created the design, you can go back and watch. You can pause this video, watch the video, then come back. This is also a constant. What else are we doing? Oh, the color. Require this dot color. So what we'll do here, we'll use the color that has been specified. So why are we doing this? This is because as you can see here, we have two colors, three colors, one that looks like gray, one that looks like pink, and this one that looks like pink, they're like maroon. And since we want to make this easier when it comes to reusing this button, we'll make it such that the developer can actually specify the color for each button instead of manually creating each button and specifying the color. So we'll have one class that is reused, and to increase its reusability, we are allowing the user to specify the color. So let's continue. So and also we need to override our widget build. I'm not sure whether we did that here. So we'll use that here. We'll use these components, our button. inside our calculator. So we already added a column, and we started by separating this into two parts, the upper part and the lower part. The upper part had the text field where we'll be displaying the numbers for calculating. In the lower part, we'll be having our buttons. So we are currently dealing with the buttons part. And for the buttons part, we started by adding a column. A column allows us to add multiple widgets, sorry, while displaying them vertically. So let's go ahead. But now you also need a row to display them horizontally, since according to our design, we have 5 rows and 4 columns. So let's go ahead. Children. Button. So what's our first value? C and delete. So our first value takes a string, which is C, and the color will be this color. So the color is a constant. But let's not first do that. So this is the first row, and our first row has like 4 buttons. So let me copy and paste this. And remember, you need to separate each widget with a comma. So our second item was an icon. I'm not sure they'll be able to implement that right now, but let's replace that with the word del to symbolize delete, then percentage, then percentage. Our last item is times. We just use X or capital X. It is small x. But you can actually note that according to our design, the last color is actually different. So let me copy and paste the color. So let's refresh this and see how it looks. You can actually see let me remove this. So I'll have to make some changes to the column. So main cross axis alignment, dot I think I also need to use expanded on this. Let me see that this will change. It actually doesn't change anything. Okay, but before I make further changes, let's go back to our component and specify the border radius. I want to specify the color for the border, but maybe the radius. Wait, I need to specify the shape and provide a rounded rectangular border. Give it a border radius of border radius dot circular, then provide the radius. I want to give it a big value. I'll give it maybe a 4. Let me refresh this. Yes, I wanted to have the square pattern. And let's make changes here. So it looks like for each row, we'll have to enclose it in an expanded, and also each button. So if you actually don't specify a flex, the program automatically gives it a default value of 1. And so in our case, we won't have to specify this. So next, we'll add an expanded for each button, which won't also give a value. Needs to be 4. I'm just copying and pasting. And for this, I'll cut Control X and paste it. And finally, for the last item, so let me refresh. You can actually notice that it fills the whole width. So how many rows are we left with? We're left with like 4 more rows. So I'll copy and paste this. The expanded together with all the rest. That's the second row. So we're just copying and pasting to actually determine how the layout will be. Then later on we'll individually change the values inside. So let's go ahead. So these are two rows, no, three. 1, 2, 3. Remaining with two more. The two more rows are done. Let me confirm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me refresh. You can actually see how it appears. But I've actually noticed something. Now, I started by using an elevated button, and I'm guessing that's why the buttons are rectangular in shape. And I think I'm actually going to have to change this. So let me go back to my components. And I think what I'll do, instead of using an elevated button, I'll use a card and use a gesture indicator. So let's make the change. So I'll still return a container. So let me delete all this. Everything listed inside the elevated button. So our child will be a card. We'll give it a color, the color that we specified. We'll also give it a shape. So the shape determines its border radius, which will be outlined, not outlined, rounded. So depending on how you want the button to look, you can actually use rounded border or outlined. So outlined border, from the word outline, provides an outlined border where you can actually specify the color of the border. You might actually use it in other projects, but not in this project. So for this case, we'll be using the rounded rectangle border. We also have to specify a border radius, which will be border radius dot circular. Then let's give it 5. What else? So inside our card, we'll have to have our text, which takes a data, and in our case, the data will be the value. And we'll also have to style this text. How do we style this? Give it a, first of all, we need to specify it is text style. Then specify the font size, 20. Font weight, dot bold. Font family, So the figures I'm giving when it comes to the font size don't actually have to be the exact figures when it comes to your project. On my display it might be different, but maybe when you run it on your mobile phone, it might be too big or too small. So make the necessary adjustments until you're pleased with what you see. What else are we remaining? Okay, these are constant. Oh, we forgot to add a gesture indicator. So I've started by cutting to extract all that code. So let me explain this. We have a widget known as gesture indicator, which actually helps you capture events. Events are like the clicking, touching a button, long pressing. It helps you capture that event and maybe trigger an action whenever such events are occurring. And so in our case, since we cannot capture the click event on a card directly, we'll have to separately specify it. That's where the guest indicator comes in. So it takes a child, we will paste that code and an on tap, which we'll specify later. So let's run this. So for the height, I think you need to specify the height and width. Give it a double dot infinity. For the width also, a double dot infinity. I've actually noticed that our text are black. Change that to white. So color, colors dot white. Then we also need to center this text align, align dot center. You can actually see the buttons are bigger, but they actually look like they are too big. So you can actually notice that our text appears on top. So to change this, we'll have to add a center widget. Which automatically centers. Yes. I feel like the texts are too small. I could maybe increase this to 25. I think that's a bit better. So Let's make the other changes. Our first row is correct, but for our second row we have 7, 8, 9. So let's go ahead and change this. So where's our first row? This is our first row. So for our second row it will be 7, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9, and a divide sign. I'll have to Google that since it doesn't appear on our keyboard. Divide sign. It is. With a row 4, 5, 6, and a minus. 5, 6, and a minus. Then for the final row, it is 0, full stop, and equals. So looks like one widget won't be needed. Let's delete. So 0, a full stop, and an equal sign. Let's run this. Looks like we made changes to the wrong widget. Let me undo that. Oh, 1, 2, 3, and a plus. 1, 2, 3, and a plus. Then for the last row, a 0, full stop, and equal sign. A 0, full stop, and an equal sign. So we won't be needing the fourth row. So let's refresh. Yes, you can actually see how it turns out. One thing I've noticed we didn't do is that we didn't add padding on the edges. I think we'll do that. So to avoid any confusions, I'm taking this column which covers all these rows. Actually note, I'll be cutting column then I'll ensure that I add a container and I add a padding for them to have uniform spacing. So the padding will be edge insets dot all, give it a value of 3, then child, then paste back my whole column and avoid the 2 commas. So let me refresh. Yes, you can actually see how that we now have the spacing on the edges. But one thing you'll actually notice that these have equal spacing, but we want the 0 to be bigger than the rest. So how do we go about this? We'll add the flex value, and for the flex value, our first item will have a flex of 2 and the rest will have a flex of 1. So let's go ahead. So it dictates how the available space is shared among the available widgets. Let's paste. Nice. You can actually see. Oh, so we have the equal sign, and we also need to change the color. So let me go back to our design and confirm its color. I'll paste this, I'll copy this, then paste it to the project, which is this last item. Nice, nice, nice. I'm still checking out the spacing, and I feel like the spacing isn't even. It's only even in between, but outside it's not. But so far I'm satisfied with what you've created. So thank you for staying tuned. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've learned a lot. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you can get informed when I'll be releasing the second part for this mobile app section. Let's meet in the next video, and don't forget to leave a like on the video and also comment. Thank you for staying tuned.